So I wanted to give you a couple of tips for kind of planning out your work and thinking about how to approach each of the sections. So in looking at the dissertation template, and again, this is Grand Canyon University specific, but you can apply something like this to how your school does things. In our template, I'm going to just show you something that you may or may not already be familiar with, but in Word, if you go to View in the ribbon and select Navigation pane, you'll be able to kind of navigate through the template. But I want to show you something. In each of these different sections, there's the rubric, right? And for each of these, it tells you what the minimum requirement is for that section. So for the introduction, they want 3 to 4 paragraphs or approximately 1 page. And you should cover all of these points, okay? So what I did, because I'm a dork and I like to have this kind of detail to plan out my dissertation and my timing, is I went through and I took all of these sections and I wrote them out. So I know I've got to write a dedication, acknowledgments. For chapter 1, these were the sections I needed to write. The background of the study, the terms, anticipated limitations. Chapter 2, here's what I needed to do. And then for the review of literature, I broke up the 30 pages that I needed to write, but I broke it up by theme because I wrote them by themes. So you'll see it's listed out separately, but this is all the review of literature right here. Okay. Did the same thing for all the sections in chapter 3, chapter 4, and chapter 5. Then what I did is I went to that rubric and I put down here what the recommended length was. Okay, so 3 to 4 paragraphs for the introduction, 2 to 3 paragraphs for the background of the study. There's not a recommended length for the definition of terms because it's going to vary depending on your study. Same thing for the anticipated limitations. And then summary and organization of the remainder of the study, 1 to 2 pages. Okay, and then you'll see the rest. I broke down the information just by going through all the rubrics. Okay, so this told me what my target was, and it gave me a sense for chapter 1 feels like it's going to be pretty easy to write. We know chapter 2 is going to take a little bit more time because you've got a minimum 30 pages for your entire review of literature. Okay, but if you know, only have a short amount of time on the weekend, but you want to keep moving forward, you can look at something like this introduction to chapter 3 is 2 to 3 paragraphs. You can knock that out in a couple of hours. And the purpose of this study, that's 1 to 2 paragraphs. You can pick and choose things that you can knock out so that you can keep progressing forward and do continual work on something. Okay. So as I was going through my proposal, I actually was asked to start on chapter 3. So I kind of looked at all the sections in chapter 3. The easiest one for me to start with, honestly, was the population and the sample selection. And that was 1 to 2 pages. Mine ended up being quite a bit more. So what I ended up doing, again, because I'm a dork and I like to keep this kind of data, is I tracked my actual page count. Okay, because I wanted to make sure that I was hitting the minimums and I was getting to what I needed to get to. Okay, and you can see for some of these, chapter 3, the introduction, was supposed to be recommended 2 to 4 paragraphs. Mine ended up being 4.5 pages. Okay, because there were a lot of things that I needed to talk about in the introduction. Okay. The research questions and hypothesis, 1 to 2 pages. Mine ended up being 4 pages. Purpose of the study, 1 to 2 paragraphs. I ended up with 3. It's just how it worked out. Okay. And I just kind of did that just to track and keep a sense for how much work I was doing and what my totals were, because I was curious in that information. But as I was going through, like you'll see when I go through chapter 3, I kept track of what draft I was on, because when you get done with chapter 3, you send that off to your chair and to the methodologist, and you start working on something else. So you might be on a second revision of chapter 3 and you're turning in your first version or your first draft of chapter 1. Okay, so sometimes it can get a little confusing as to where you're at. So I just like to track these kind of things. The other thing I tracked was the writing status. Was it as draft 1, draft 2? Was it approved? And then you'll see the approval status. Was it ready for AQR? And then I kept notes. And I have this hidden because it's kind of messy, but you can see some of the things that I tracked. Okay. And I built a drop-down list here for the writing status so I could see whether it was submitted, if I hadn't started it yet, if I was in progress, if it was done, if I was in revision. There's just a whole lot here, but you can update this. Proposal was complete. It's been edited. Dissertation complete, kind of a thing. Okay. And then over here, what's the approval status? Chair approved, chair and methodologist approved, chair and content expert approved, AQR approved, IRB all approved. So it's just some things that I did to kind of help me figure out where I was with different sections. And then I kept my notes over here on like when I sent in draft 2, when I submitted draft 3, those kinds of things, just so I could track the history. It's a little bit much. Again, this is not for everybody, but it was just one way that I could track where I was and kind of keep myself motivated because I could see that, chapter 3 was a lot of work and it was the first thing that I finished. And that really motivated me to get through chapter 2 and then chapter 1. Okay. So if this is something that interests you, I do have a blank form that I will put in a link in the comments. You're welcome to access it and use it and tweak it and use it however you want to. It will have the drop downs on it if you're familiar with data validation and adding drop down menus to your Excel spreadsheet. But hopefully this will be helpful to you and kind of give you a sense for what you can do and how you can break down the work so it's a little bit easier to chunk it out and get stuff done rather than thinking about this huge thing that you've got to get done. What's the phrase they always say? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You've just got to make it small enough that you can chew on it and get through it. And then at some point you'll be done with the elephant. So hope that was helpful and good luck on your dissertation.